There's been a whole lot of talk about secession in the past couple of weeks, notably because Donald Trump supporters do not want to see a Joe Biden presidency, and Donald Trump will not concede and is challenging this all the way to the electoral vote count on January 6th, where he has called on his supporters to descend on Washington, D.C. for a wild protest. Well, secession might not be the answer, but I have to wonder about at least one state, California. You see, when we talk about secession, one thing the left likes to say all the time, the Democrats mostly, not the leftists, is that without the blue states, the red states would be a third world country. And based on what's going on in California, I'm not sure any conservative or Trump supporter will care. For that matter, I'm not sure traditional liberals will care either, because there is a massive recall effort to remove Governor Gavin Newsom, who has failed the state of California. Now, I must be fair, my friends. The problems California is facing did not originate with Gavin Newsom. That state is a mess. And perhaps that's what happens when you get single party rule. Now, we jokingly will say the Democrats and the Republicans are the uniparty because they mostly agree on all the worst things, notably war. But in California, you got something special. Democrat supermajorities control almost everything, especially in major cities. And when you look at LA, you see a crisis. Right now, they yell at Donald Trump. They say, Trump, he is responsible for COVID. Before COVID happened, I had been covering the rise of medieval diseases in California. So before you want to go and yell at the president and the vice president, why don't you look in your own bedroom? When Nancy Pelosi and other people in California were like, come on down to Chinatown, don't be racist, encouraging mass gatherings. And then we see California, one of the worst affected states with COVID right now. So I'm not surprised to see they are saying, get this man out of there. I'm also not surprised to see, as most of you probably know, Elon Musk, Joe Rogan, two very wealthy and prominent former residents of California. They have left and they've gone to Texas. I'm not sure going to Texas is the right move, and many people in Texas are concerned that these well-to-do liberals are going to flee to their state where everything's a lot better. But it's a lot better because they don't have the same politicians from the state you came from. No, the idea that people would go from California to Texas and then vote for Democrat policies, I got to admit, that's a freaky one. So I tell you this, when I said I was moving out of the Philadelphia area, South Jersey, I'm coming to a red area and I'm a guest here. So I'm going to defer to the people who live here because you know what? Things are a lot better out here. They like to say the red states would be a third world country. Oh, please. Let me please show you what's going on in California in this mess of a wasteland. Before we get started, head over to timcast.com/donate if you'd like to support my work. There are many ways you can give. Got a P.O. box. You want to send me some stuff. But the best thing you can do is share this video. My friends, there are probably a lot of people who don't know about what's going on in California and why we often rag on this state. But let me talk about something else, too. The mass exodus is not just wealthy celebrities. It's the middle class. The policies of California have failed. The policies of Gavin Newsom have failed. These Democrat elites, they don't seem to care at all about COVID. They go out, they flout the rules, they say lockdown for everyone, but not for me. And Newsom gets caught dining out with a bunch of friends, including medical experts who are telling you, you can't work, you must stay home. The people need to know what's happening in these places. So let's read. Before we do, don't forget to smash that like button, subscribe, hit that notification bell, share this video, and let's check it out. NBC News reports recall effort against California governor, an attempt to destabilize the political system. Analysts say, oh, sure. I'm sure these analysts know exactly what's going on. Quote, we wouldn't have been as successful as we've been if it weren't for Gavin Newsom, a Recall Gavin 2020 organizer said. Well, I guess that makes sense. Destabilizing the political system. My friends, I brought up just a moment ago that there were medieval diseases arising in California. Let me just stress, we knew that the conditions of California and their failures to solve the homelessness crisis and poverty that was affecting their state was spreading disease. Then COVID hit. And the narrative changed. We began talking about this pandemic and these lockdowns, forgetting that we knew this was coming and California was in the worst possible position. And you know what? The buck stops with Gavin Newsom. Now, I know the Democratic Party has a lot to be blamed for. But I do think if you're looking for the truly guilty party, Californians, you need only look in a mirror, either through complacency or by voting for these people. The single party rule of California resulted in politicians who did nothing for you. In fact, they just extracted value and then just watched the system burn. I don't want to blame regular people. OK, I understand the leaders are the ones who are supposed to be solving these problems. But California, in my opinion, is a failed state for one major reason. Once they got single party rule, there was never again a reason to challenge the system or to actually fight for something good. These people knew if I run as a Democrat, I win, period. So I don't got to do nothing for you. I get the salary. I get what I want. People need to realize the danger that comes with this. Now, I can say, based on what I'm telling you here, you might understand why Donald Trump is still calling for people to go vote in Georgia to make sure the Republicans can hold the Senate, because he recognizes even without him, especially without him, if the Democrats take control of all three, well, I shouldn't say all three branches, but the two chambers of Congress and the executive branch, they're going to be able to stack the Supreme Court. Then they will have all three branches of government, and the United States will become California. NBC reports. Less than 2 years into office, California Governor Gavin Newsom is being forced to defend his job, battered by several crises, including a coronavirus pandemic, crippling unemployment, devastating wildfires, and one very poorly timed fancy dinner. Newsom faces a recall effort that shows no sign of slowing. A petition to oust Newsom has more than half the signatures needed to trigger a special election. This is amazing. They might actually get rid of the guy, said Orrin Heatley, who was leading the Recall Gavin 2020 campaign. Volunteers had collected 844,000 signatures by Tuesday, he said. The recall campaign must gather 1.5 million signatures by mid-March to force an election. And it will need a surplus of signatures because some are likely to be disqualified during the certification process. He has done this to himself, Heatley said. We wouldn't have been as successful as we've been if it weren't for Gavin Newsom. Dan Newman, a spokesman for the governor, said Californians will have to decide whether they want a distraction and circus to pull attention away from the state's problems. He said a special election could cost taxpayers upwards of $100 million as the state works to distribute COVID-19 vaccinations, reopen schools, and kickstart the economy. Quote, this is a ragtag crew of pro-Trump, anti-vaccine extremists, along with some ambitious Republican politicians who would like to be governor, Newman said. I don't think it's something anyone wants. I'd be surprised if Californians wanted to spend the extra money and have another election the following year. Well, that man is just outright wrong. Because right now in California, they are experiencing a staggering exodus. The collapse of the population is mind-boggling. From Eyewitness ABC7, California's population growth rate at record low as more people leave. Wednesday's new population estimate was that 135,600 more people left the state than moved there. No joke. Officially, California added 21,200 people from July 1st to 2019 to July 1st, 2020, increasing the state's population by 0.05%. Still by far the most of any state. Okay, well, that's fair context, right? But the bigger news from Wednesday's new population estimate was that 135,600 more people left the state than moved there. It's only the 12th time since 1900 the state has had a net migration loss, and the third largest ever recorded. California became a state in 1850 after a gold rush spurred a massive migration of people moving west to seek their fortune. The state boomed again following World War II because of the aerospace and defense industry, and again in the 1980s and early 1990s as technology companies made Silicon Valley a household name. That growth slowed for the first time in the 90s, and yeah, I understand all that. Here's the issue. This is actually bad news in a bunch of different ways. I'll tell you why it's bad news first and foremost as it pertains to Gavin Newsom and the problems he's creating. The people who are clearly upset with what the governor did are leaving instead of staying and signing signing this petition to remove the man. I don't blame him. I don't blame him because you can point that criticism right at me as well. I recently moved from the South Philadelphia area, South Jersey, to a more rural red area. Now, officially, I am not moved yet, but we will be officially moved soon. I'm in an area that is now dominated by Trump supporters and people who have very bold things to say about January 6th. It's kind of freaking me out. But as I said, I recognize myself as kind of a guest. I am coming into a community of people who have voted certain ways and done certain things that has benefited this area particularly, meaning a lot of people are happier, it would seem. More space, fresh air, less pollution. The people out here really know how to live. More freedom. And people are reliant on themselves. I can respect that. So I tell you, you want to live in California and you want this stuff, by all means, do it with my blessing. But therein lies the bigger question about peaceful divorce or secession. And that's why I opened this segment talking about it. What happens when everyone who hates the Democratic Party and Newsom leaves the state and goes to Texas? Actually might be good news for Texas. You know, I'm not saying everybody's going to Texas because they're going to a handful of other states. But think about it. I mean, Joe Rogan is very pro-gun. It's my understanding. But he is pretty lefty in a lot of policy issues. If he ends up voting, will he vote knowing what happened to California for the Democratic Party? I'm not entirely convinced, although many of these people might. But you got to recognize the people who are leaving California are the ones who recognize the problem with the state and the problems with people like Gavin Newsom. Not all of them, but maybe enough. Maybe that means Texas will start becoming more red, especially as southern Texas, which used to be super blue, and as many Latino migrants, Mexican migrants, actually went towards Trump. Interestingly enough, Texas might become more red. California might become more blue. The people who are okay with what these Democrat governors are doing and they're staying there and defending them, well, then they're going to entrench themselves. And those who can't stand what these governors are doing are going to leave. And you're going to end up with free states, for lack of a better term, and lockdown states. Isn't that going to be strange? Maybe when we talk about civil war, conflict, and secession, what's not going to happen is on January 6th, Alex Jones shows up with 10 million patriots and they storm Washington, D.C. and occupy. Maybe that won't happen. Maybe it'll be a very large peaceful protest. They'll say rabble, 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 and Joe Biden becomes the president. But what if Joe Biden is effectively our James Buchanan, a very weak and feckless politician who can do nothing to stop the increasing tensions between free states and lockdown states? You have places like California that don't know what they're doing. The lockdowns didn't work the first time, but they just keep doing it, I guess. I put my hand in the fire and it burned. Better put my hand in the fire again, they say, as everything just gets worse. Well, people are fleeing. The state's ideological differences seem to be emboldening because of things like this. People like me leaving the blue state that I lived in and now going to a red state. Now, admittedly, I'm actually pretty lefty on economic policy, but I will not, absolutely will not be voting for any Democrats in these areas or anything like that. Sorry. You know, I've talked about this quite a bit. I'm actually in favor of Medicare for all, sort of. What I should say sort of is I like the idea of universal healthcare. I like the idea that we don't have our healthcare tied to businesses. I'm sorry, Democrats and progressives, I'm not going anywhere near this stuff because of what the Democrats have done to their states. I'm going to back away and say, you guys who seem to be doing it right, I defer to you at this point. I may disagree on some issues, but I don't want the place I live in to become like the place I came from. So I'm going to sit back and say, y'all are doing it right. Let me sit on my porch and, crack open a beer with no mask on and big open fields and mountains as far as the eye can see and just say, leave me alone. That seems to be working out so far. But where does that bring us in 4 years? Well, if Donald Trump does not win now, he will be back again 2024. He'll be pretty old. He'll be 78. But Joe Biden's 78 now. Trump, for his age, is a spry man. But when you get around that age, the decline starts to happen faster and faster. We'll see if he's as energetic and spry in 4 more years. But what happens when you have a weak and feckless James Buchanan-like president in Joe Biden, who does nothing to defend America or her interests? Trump comes back and says, America, I told you so. But at this point, after the chaos and the lockdowns and the authoritarianism, blue states and red states are so ideologically separated, they say, get out. We've already seen people saying things like, why can't we have Donald Trump as our president and they can have Joe Biden and we'll peacefully divorce? People on left and right, I've heard them both say it. The left mocks the right saying, you want your peaceful divorce? Fine, you'll be a third world country. I don't think they care. I don't think anybody who lives in, say, I don't know, Idaho or Iowa or Nebraska is going like, I wish we were more like California. It's a net benefit that we have these people in our country. No, if anything, they're saying, get out. Take your independence if you want it. Of course, that's not likely going to happen. Let me show you the Recall Gavin Newsom website, and then we'll talk more about this exodus. Because California is so desperate in this collapse, they're talking about taxing anybody who's been there longer than 60 days in a year period for 10 years. Okay, let me break that down for you. If you go to California for 10 days, just for a business trip, but throughout the year you have to go 6 times, 60 days accumulated in 1 year period, California says they will tax you for 10 years after that, no matter where you are. How are you going to enforce that? Are they going to send California State Patrol to New York or to Maine to get you? I have no idea. Now, they haven't passed that bill yet, but they're talking about it, and that's nuts. Over on the Recall Gavin Newsom website, they say, Governor Gavin Newsom has failed Californians. Unaffordable housing, record homelessness, rising crime, failing schools, independent contractors thrown out of work, exploding pension debt, and now a lockdown population while the prisons are emptied. Hold Gavin Newsom accountable. Gavin Newsom must go. Recall effort against California Governor Newsom reaches major milestones. 844,000 signatures. They could trigger a special election. A special election. And then they kick him out. But you know what's going to happen? I would not be surprised if you end up with another Democrat. You know why? We're well past the point where a reasoned argument will convince someone to do the right thing. Donald Trump, as the joke goes, could run into a burning building to save a child who is inhaling smoke and begging for help, and they would claim that Trump injured the child because he didn't actually know how to properly carry him out of the burning building. Can you believe it? Trump should have waited for the firemen to go in and... I get it. Now, Trump may be on the way out, but this tribalism isn't going anywhere. In fact, it's being emboldened. We're at the point now where the Democrats are going to be like, I don't care who gets elected so long as we snap back, clap back the Republicans. That's what it is. Look at AOC. Now, I'm not going to be overly critical in terms of, AOC not getting anything done. In her first 2 years, she's got some post offices renamed, but it's typical for a freshman, Congress a person, I guess, to be PC, to not really get a bunch of bills passed. Now you look at Nancy Pelosi. She's got very little passed in her entire tenure. So sure. But AOC is the perfect example of a culture war, snap back, clap back politician. That's what it is. That's on Twitter when they do the clapping emojis. We need healthcare now. Great. You're not actually doing anything to make that happen. One of the most annoying things ever is when AOC was talking to Honan, I think his name was, of ICE. And she's like, legal asylees are not criminals. And he's like, they entered the country illegally under section 203, subsection, whatever. It's like, oh, dude. Snapping, clap back. That's what it is. Snap back, clap back. Snap, 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 clap, clap, clap. They are not criminals. You're not talking about law. You're not talking about policy, okay? Now, I gave AOC respect when she got arrested because the core basis of the Green New Deal I actually am in favor of. What they proposed is trash nonsense. Social justice, critical race theory stuff. I don't want to get behind that. I want to talk about new generations of nuclear technology, carbon-free, high-density energy that makes us more energy independent. You see, right now, Trump has brought us to energy independence, but we're doing it with fracking. Hey, man, if we did nuclear power plants and other higher density renewables, we could probably get energy independence and offset all of that carbon stuff. Sounds like a good compromise. We didn't get there with people like AOC because all she does is go on Twitter and say, the Republicans. Well, the Republicans, blah, blah, blah. You know what? You know who else I have a problem with? That Tim Pool guy. Because all he does is make videos complaining about Democrats all the time. Guy just constantly complains about the Democrats and only sometimes about the Republicans. I get it. Criticize me for it. I'm never going to run for office. I don't want to be involved in that stuff. And maybe that's one of the biggest problems we have. But I don't want to be a snapback, clapback politician, okay? And I don't think we should be voting for these people. But that's what you're going to get. You can kick out Newsom. Congratulations. The next person who's going to get in is going to be 10 times worse because the people who actually stood up against this stuff have already left Texas and other states. And the people who remain are going to be like, we're going to own the cons. We got to make Republicans cry. That's why when that Republican dude, he's the young man who won, he said, cry more libs on Twitter. I was very critical of that. I don't want to see a Republican being a snapback, clapback politician, and I don't want to see the Democrats do it. But that's where we're headed. Instagram influencer politicians, they can generate a following faster by enraging people, and then they get nothing done. But you know what? The establishment probably loves it. So much easier to control these the population and these politicians when the politicians you bring in are mindless, feckless, clapback influencers. And that's what you get. Now, to be fair, Donald Trump is also a culture war politician. But Donald Trump is somebody who actually understands trade and actually did pretty well in certain areas. I'd say Trump, if in the first 2 years of his presidency, he didn't bring on people like Bolton, I'd actually consider him to be a great president. In my lifetime, he's the best. Now, to push buttons on people like my buddy Luke Rudkowski, when I was on the IRL podcast, I asked him, do you think Trump is the greatest president? And, of our generation or whatever. Yeah, sure. Look, I've been through, I think I was born, who was president when I was born? Reagan? And then we had George H.W. Bush. Then we had Bill Clinton. Okay. I vaguely remember some Bill Clinton stuff. All right. I was a baby when it was Reagan or whatever. I remember George W. Bush. I remember Barack Obama. I can only really compare Trump to those two. And I got to say, he's doing a better job. Oh, that's right. The left loves Obama, but Obama was tyrannical in a lot of ways. The National Defense Authorization Act, indefinite detention provisions, the disposition matrix, a.k.a. the kill list, charging more leakers and whistleblowers under the Espionage Act than all of the presidents combined, more new wars. Not a big fan. But he wrapped it all up with a big, hearty smile, and he convinced people to vote for him. Well, Donald Trump did the opposite. He ripped that smile off like the Joker and freaked a bunch of people out, much to his own detriment. But in the last few years, he's done a pretty good job. Donald Trump is still a culture war politician, and I don't like the clapback stuff. Trump going on Twitter and snapping at people, I don't like it. I don't like it when he does it or when AOC does it. I want to see a real progressive politician and a real right-wing populist politician. And I want to see them have a good sit-down discussion. And you know who I think is great on the right? Tucker Carlson. I mean, the dude he operates, obviously, for the most part, in good faith. He did do a segment on like marijuana legalization that I felt like he was pressured into, because I know that's not how he really feels. He's a very libertarian, populist kind of guy. Not perfectly, not completely. But I think he operates in good faith. He brings on Antifa. He brings on leftists. Some of the kind of conversations I want to see. And I want to see legitimate, honest leftists bring up real conversations and have real debates on certain issues. And the left has some people I think do a great job. Jimmy Dore, I've been praising him for the past week or so because he's putting pressure on the Democrats and the progressives to do their jobs and challenge Nancy Pelosi. Much respect. And I believe Jimmy recently went on Tucker Carlson. That's a conversation I'd love to see in depth, couple hours. Jimmy, Tucker, come on my podcast. That'll be fantastic. That's what I look for moving forward, but I don't think we're going to get it. I don't want to go off on that tangent. Let's get back to California, and I'll show you what probably is the most striking bit of evidence that California is facing dire straits, and their desperation has become so thick and palpable, you could cut it with a knife. The Wall Street Journal says a California plan to chase away the rich, then keep stalking them. A proposed wealth tax would apply for a decade to anyone who spends 60 days in the state in a single year. Could you imagine how many people? Let's play a game. You work out of Delaware. Okay, a lot of Delaware corporations. And they say, we sell water purifiers. Just a random thing, okay? And so they're like, we need you to go and negotiate with this mid-sized business. They've got, what's a mid? Well, let's say large business. Let's say they've got, 50 chains. They're a restaurant, and they only really exist throughout Northern and Central California. We want you to go to California, and you're going to be there for 4 days. Try and sell them these filters and give them a demonstration. Goes to California, comes back. Then they say, we got a big expo happening in California. We want you to go there. It's a 4-day ordeal, so you're going to be there the day before and the day after. So you'll be there for 6 days. You go, imagine you have this job and you travel all around the country, and then you break that magic number, 60 days in California. Then all of a sudden you get a tax bill to your home, and they're telling you got to pay them taxes based on your wealth. The hard assets you own, California says, pay up. Or what? What are they going to do? Charge you criminally? What do they think is going to happen? More importantly, what would happen if they pass this law and then you're sitting, you're at your job and they're like, Bill, we want you to go to California to this big cow. Oh, I'm not going to California. What do you mean? What do you mean? No, it's part of your job. No way. If I'm on 59 days already, I go there for one more day, they're going to tax me for a decade. People are going to be like, let's not work out of California. The Wall Street Journal says, California's legislature is considering a wealth tax on residents, part-year residents, and any person who spends more than 60 days inside the state's border in a single year. Even those who move out of the state would continue to be subject to the tax for a decade, a provision that calls to mind the Eagles' famous Hotel California lyric, "You can check out anytime you like, but you can never leave." The California Constitution probably allows a statewide wealth tax on residents, but any effort to create a tax capable of reaching cross-state borders is likely to run afoul of the U.S. Constitution. Taxing someone who spends only 60 days in the state in any single year and extending that tax over an ensuing decade would be something new under the sun. Each year, this tax net would gather up a new crop of taxpayers for the next decade. This shows you their absolute desperation. But let me explain to you how the wealth tax will work and ultimately how it would fail. The game they're playing with a wealth tax is kind of like property tax. You say you own a house, right? Well, you got to pay a property tax on that house. The property tax on houses can actually be kind of high in some places. So maybe you have a house that's worth, a couple $100,000 and you end up paying $4,000 per year. You have to pay essentially a tax for where you are, a rent, as it were. You're never free of this. So your house can still be repossessed even if you own it outright. A wealth tax operates in a very similar way, but it operates based on your net worth, hard assets. So let's say, you own a camper van. Maybe you're retiring, so you buy a camper. The question I have about wealth tax is, if it's based on your net worth, could you not just buy something absurdly large so your net worth is negative? Maybe you have $1 million in hard assets, but $1 million in one in debt. In which case, they're not going to apply the wealth tax to you. You see how this game is played. But let's say you come to inherit something from, you get an RV, handed down from your grandparents after their unfortunate passing. They're old, and they say, we're going to leave you our old, 2013, whatever, Class A, massive. It's worth 2013. Maybe it's worth 40 or 50 grand. Now, Class A actually probably worth more than that, maybe like 70 or 80. All of a sudden, you come into this wealth, and they say, you owe us on the wealth you have. But you're like, bro, I'm homeless. I live in a van. I don't have any wealth. Too bad. You got to pay on this. Obviously, the wealth tax is targeting those who reach a certain threshold. But the point I'm trying to make is you could be really rich. And if you own something that can't be sold or can't be used as currency, how do you pay that? The rich will flee in droves. That's why they're trying to say, well, we'll tax you for 10 more years. That's how desperate they've become. We're looking at the total collapse of California. But I think this is just the beginning of the bell curve. California had a meteoric rise for some time. The Hollywood, Silicon Valley, a lot of things made this place worth living. Not so much anymore. And something interesting is happening outside of it. You have people who are making an industry out of getting out of these places. But take a look at this, a tale of two migrations. Why, last year we could point out that people were leaving California. Net migration from other states to California in 2016 was minus 117. In 2015, it was minus 102, minus 41,000 in 2014. But net migration from other countries has been steadily increasing. Now, it peaked a while ago, back in like 1993. But starting in about 2010, net migration from other countries is going up. California is bringing in foreign migrants as American citizens are fleeing the state. That's going to make for a very interesting position in the next few years as conversation around secession begins to emerge. American citizens in many places who are fleeing California aren't going to look at California as a very American place. And they might say, by all means, secede. California has wanted to secede for a long time. Or at least, I say many individuals in California. It doesn't mean they will. But now as we see the ideological drift where you have free states and lockdown states, people are leaving California because of this disaster, and they're going to other states that are much more free. And in the end, in 4 years, what? The red states and the blue states are so ideologically divided, they don't even view themselves as part of the same country. Maybe that's where we go. But at any rate, let California be an example of the failures of what these Democrats do once they assume supermajority control. And that's probably why it's a good idea to not let Democrats win in Georgia. To be fair, I don't care about Loeffler or Perdue in Georgia. Trump is calling on his supporters to make sure they win, but Trump supporters want Trump to win. Maybe it's just too soon for Trump and whatever's about to go on. Or maybe this is the beginning of some kind of civil war. It was pointed out to me by some people that we do have the divided states, red and blue, and they're entrenched. They're not going to change. The fact that we have swing states is kind of a scary proposition. Those are the disputed territories. But what happens when all of the states solidify? What happens when the Republicans know they will never win an election again? And they might not. It might be too late. I think the Democrats are going to win in Georgia. Would the Republicans just say our voice no longer exists and this imposing culture shall rule over us for forever? No, they're going to say, you go do your thing. It's untenable. We'll see how it rolls. January 6th will be interesting, to say the least, with Alex Jones and, as he says, 10 million people descend on D.C. to stop Joe Biden from becoming president. I don't know if they'll actually be able to do anything to stop it. I think an occupation of D.C., as they've called it, a peaceful demonstration, an occupation, might change things. Well, in a couple of weeks, we'll find out. Thanks for hanging out, everybody. Next segment's coming up tomorrow at youtube.com/TimCastNews, 10 a.m., and I will see you all then.